Let's start today's story.
Summer 2008. A Greyhound bus is traveling down an isolated stretch of the Trans-Canada Highway. Inside, 22-year-old Tim McLean is sleeping against a window. Out of nowhere, the passenger next to him produces a knife. What follows is a gruesome and highly publicized homicide in Canadian history. 14 years later, on the streets of Toronto, a parallel tragedy occurs. Over the course of 2 days in April 2022, Kartik Vasudev and Elijah Mahepath are gunned down by a stranger while going about their routines. Kartik was right here, outside the Sherbourne subway station, on his way to his part-time job. On the surface, these two cases are separated by time, geography, and method, but the perpetrators, Vince Lee on the bus and Richard Edwin in Toronto, shared a documented link. Both men were acting under delusions caused by schizophrenia, yet the justice system handled them in opposite ways. Vince Lee was remanded to a psychiatric hospital for treatment and was eventually granted an absolute discharge to live freely. Richard Edwin was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in a federal penitentiary. If both men committed horrific acts while suffering from the same severe mental illness, why does the law treat one as a patient in need of care and the other as a criminal deserving a cell? To answer that, we have to look at Section 16 of the Canadian Criminal Code. In the criminal justice system, convicting someone requires proving mens rea, the guilty mind. You have to intend to commit the crime. A severe mental illness does not grant automatic legal immunity. You can see how rare this defense actually is in this visualization. Out of millions of adult criminal court cases, successful not criminally responsible, or NCR verdicts, make up this subset right here, less than 0.09% of all cases. The Supreme Court precedent set in Arver. Chalk clarified the legal standard. The law tests whether a mental disorder made the offender incapable of appreciating that their specific actions were morally wrong. It asks, did they know society would condemn what they were doing, even if they felt justified? In court, a schizophrenia diagnosis is only the starting point. Judges and juries look for the perpetrator's grip on reality at the exact moment they pulled the trigger or swung the knife. Let's apply that threshold to Vince Lee. Psychiatrists testified that he suffered a total break from reality on that bus. He believed God was speaking to him, commanding him to kill a demon disguised as a human. Because he believed he was saving the world from an alien threat, he had no capacity to understand that his actions were morally wrong. Without that mens rea, the court ruled him not criminally responsible and removed him from the criminal system entirely. Richard Edwin followed a different path. While he was also experiencing delusions, his actions showed documented premeditation. He systematically acquired a firearms license, purchased an arsenal of rifles and handguns, and bought a safe to store them in his apartment. The judge looked at that level of planning and determined Edwin still had the capacity to appreciate the moral wrongfulness of his plan. The court rejected the defense. This legal distinction creates two separate physical realities. Take a look at this flowchart mapping out the verdict. Individuals found NCR follow this path branching to the left. They are diverted to a provincial review board, placed in psychiatric facilities, and treated by doctors. Meanwhile, the traditional penal system path branches to the right. Individuals convicted of murder here serve fixed mandatory time in federal prisons, regardless of whether their mental health improves over the years. The law acts as a binary filter. Based on the threshold of moral awareness, it categorizes violent perpetrators into two distinct outcomes: a hospital bed or a prison cell. But behind these legal filters are the families left behind. The relatives of Tim McLean, Kartik Vasudev, and Elijah Mahepath carry the lifelong grief of losing their sons and brothers to random violence. For families facing an NCR verdict, the trauma is compounded by confusion. The person who killed their loved one is diverted out of the justice system they understand. Legally, the offender vanishes, replaced by a patient. This creates an agonizing realization about release criteria. A traditional prison sentence ends based on time served, but a mental health detention can end when doctors and the review board decide the patient is no longer a public threat. Society is trying to walk a narrow tightrope here. We are attempting to balance the need for public safety and legal accountability with the tragic medical reality of severe psychiatric illness. While Section 16 cleanly defines the legal line between a patient and a prisoner, it forces grieving families to navigate a profound void where the rigid legal definition of responsibility rarely aligns with their own need for justice.